Hi. Today I wanted to talk about the interview process. Again, there's not a one size fits all. Everybody in this documentary world does interviews differently. There's different styles, vox pops, people on the street, or highly prepared and staged interviews. We are sort of in the middle, but it is a pretty set environment that we usually work with. Usually two cameras, usually one interview partner. Usually I'm off the camera or over the shoulder shot. Sometimes there's a two shot of me and the interview partner, but you've seen quite a few of those. So I just wanted to say how we reach out to interviewees, how that works, maybe some fortitude stories, how we prepare those interviews together with the interview partner, and what we do right before we shoot, while we shoot, and after the interview is over. So first of all, the reach out. This might actually be completely different depending on the circumstance, right? The ideal scenario is, of course, I want somebody. I want this person because he or she is a celebrity. He or she is very important to the story. So an example in Fortitude would have been or Planet Labs, and Will Marshall is really a legendary figure. I read like not a biography, but part of this book was about him and his journey. And he's just quite a character. I'm sure you agree. And the other one would be X Prize, so Miss Ansari or Dr. Ansari. She's a very pivotal historic figure in the space history. So we reach out to a person or to a company, usually via the press office, and then send our credentials, our background. They do a background check and things like that, and so that will be official channels, right? Sometimes it's a specific company or a product or like a use case that I'm interested in. Not really. It's not really that about a specific person. It's more about what this specific company does, right? So an example of that would be space logistics. So I reached out to them because I had heard a podcast interview with their CEO. Their CEO wasn't actually available when I was in town in Washington D.C. And so one of the top management, Joe Anderson in this case, was available, and he was fantastic and was great. But it's a good example of I actually didn't even know this person exists, but he did a great job. Or another one would be Astro Access. When I heard about this company and the project, I was like, oh wow! So I reached out to them, and then they suggested Dr. Sherry, the blind researcher who also did a little parabolic flight with her crew of disabled. They're not astronauts, I think, researchers, I think is the right word. So that was also a fantastic interview. And then sometimes it's introductions. So, for example, Dylan introduced me to Axiom Space. Axiom Space was one of those private space stations, and I think the person we spoke to there also did a really good job, even though I had not known him before. And sometimes it's high-level introductions. So the folks at the Secure World Foundation, Crystal, they introduced us to the State Department, the U.S. State Department, and then actually that was a bit complicated because there was two interviews we did that were not approved, and then finally when I was back in Washington DC, then we got the official invitation to film in the State Department itself, and that was all approved. And I get to the preparation in a second. The other scenario is conferences, right? So when we, with a small crew, usually that's a handheld kind of crew, right, show up at a conference and then are able to get a few sound bites on the spot, right? With people who are there prepared. They have like a company and everything is there. And that's how we got ISI and ExoLaunch, for example, and many other companies. So these were conference shoots. It's not like we just walk up, hey. We walk up to a booth and say, hey, do you say a few words? So we would obviously have prepared this well in advance and reached out to them. Okay, this is the time slot. We're going to speak to this person. These are the topics, which leads me to the pre-interview phase, the preparation. So, of course, there's a lot of reading involved in most cases. Sometimes it's podcast, but a lot of books, a lot of blog posts, a lot of social media that I research before the interview. Then typically companies and interview partners want to know, what is this interview about? What are you getting at? And so I'm sending them a bullet point list. Might be 5 points, might be 10 points, right? And it always starts with their origin story or the origin story of the company, and then going down much more deeper. And unfortunately, I said this in another video, out of an hour or A lot of times these interviews are maybe 40 minutes, 30 minutes. A lot of times, only 20 seconds actually end up in the film. So you do all this work for just 20 seconds, but that's just the nature of the work. So we do prepare the interview partners so they don't feel surprised, or it's not a gotcha moment kind of gonzo journalism that we do. We do it professionally, and sometimes it rarely happens, but sometimes the company might say, look, do not mention this topic, right? Sometimes it's a scientific or technical person we speak with, so they don't want to answer financial questions, just as an example, right? Or they don't want to touch on the China issue, yeah, right. And okay, I've expert on the China issue, so I don't need to ask 20 other companies on this topic. So it's totally fine to kind of pre-approve areas of discussion. Then, of course, the release forms need to be signed before the interview. We talked about this with our producer, Chris. And the location, obviously, we set up the shot and everything. Usually beforehand, we also say a dress code. So obviously, people can wear whatever they want, but there's a few do's and don'ts. So, for example, it's not a good look usually if somebody wears a white shirt, because the lights on a set will reflect so much that it will be like a weird, odd look, right? Also, I'm sure you've seen this with small patterns on the shirt sometimes, where you have like these super small things. You have this interference effect. So we kind of prepare people for, look, you can wear whatever you want. We prefer this and this and this. And sometimes I say, look, I'll be wearing semi-formal or like business casual, and so they will match, or I will match them. So it's not completely odd, like I'm wearing a t-shirt, they're wearing a suit. And in Fortitude, we have a beach scene, of course I'm wearing a t-shirt, and in other scenes I'm wearing almost like a suit type of scenario. Right, and then when we shoot, or right before we shoot, we also usually have B-roll. B-roll just means additional shots that we record. The typical ones are close-up of hands. You see that a lot. The typical ones is maybe a greeting scene, right? So the shaking hands, or entering the set, right? So you sit here and somebody welcomes me in, or I welcome them into a scene. Those kinds of shots is always what the editors requests a lot, and we have a separate video with Michael, the editor, who always says, well, we need lots of cutaways, lots of B-roll shots. Otherwise, you cannot look at a person for longer than 12 seconds or 6 seconds, depending on which rule you follow in a documentary. And we are very fast cut, so we need extra materials. One other thing that I also always do is I'll tell the interview partners, look, if I like something, if you like your answer, if I like your story, I might ask you to repeat. Because the first time they're still thinking this, they're just what I'm doing now, right? I'm repeating a few words and ooh and but the second time it comes out smoother, because you do it the second time, it's much better. So this is important to mention beforehand, because otherwise it will be very confusing. I just answered that question. Why, the people will get annoyed. No, don't get annoyed. It's actually a good thing. I really like this. I want to use this. I want to get a second take of it. Yes, and then afterwards, after the interview, so after hopefully everything is done, we shake hands, and sometimes I send the transcript, right? So the transcript of the entire interview. I sometimes highlight what I like best, and sometimes again I give them the opportunity to say, look, if you want to take back, retract anything that you said, you regret that you said this on camera, feel free to do so. I don't think it has ever happened. Yeah, I can't think of a case in Fortitude, but there might be a scenario where somebody said, I got this statistic wrong. I used the wrong number, or the wrong year. I mentioned this year, but it was actually a year before or after, or this person is no longer the company, or something like that. So there is the potential to kind of incorporate new information after the fact, right? And you see that a lot, right? In my style of filmmaking, I let a person start a sentence, start a story, list them, and then I intercut with new information or a shorter version of this thing, right? So yeah, I'm gonna say in a different video my top 5 interviews, or the top 5 moments. But for now, yeah, this is the interview process before and after. Cheers, bye.